Welcome back to Karl Otto's Dark Anthology, and to Darkwater, the ongoing tale of a drowned man turned myth, and the shadows he hunts through the streets of Saltmarsh. In this chapter, we step away from the harbours and horrors for something smaller, but no less important. A street rat, a myth, a night that leaves both changed. This is episode 6, Ashes in the Fog. If you enjoy slow burn horror, broken heroes, and stories that twist in the dark, be sure to like, subscribe, and share the fear. Now, let's begin. Saltmarsh didn't merely sleep. It brooded, enveloped in a shroud of fog and lingering regret. The alleys after midnight were thick with it, the air heavy with moisture and the stones beneath one's feet seeming to whisper tales of bloodshed. Few knew those alleys as intimately as Jack did. He navigated them with the practiced stealth of one who had learned early on that drawing attention to yourself invited pain and suffering. He had spotted the merchant at the periphery of the fishbone market, stumbling about with a belly full of brandy and a purse too bulging for his coat pocket. A mid-tier noble by all appearances. Boisterous, slurring his words, and most importantly, alone, an easy mark. Jack tailed him at a discreet distance, his small frame melting into the dissipating fog, treading where the shadows lay thickest. Not stalking, but rather drifting. It was an art he had mastered. The grey man technique. Become unremarkable. Fade into obscurity. The mark turned into Blind Fisher's Lane. An ideal location. Narrow, devoid of watchmen, with only mildew, rats, and the silent promise of a clean escape for company. Jack seized his opportunity at the bend. Nimble fingers, feather-light touch. The purse was off the belt in less than a heartbeat. He didn't flee. He simply turned, melted back into the shadows like fog seeping beneath a doorway. Only when he reached a secluded alcove behind a shuttered bakery did he open the pouch. Coins. Not a substantial amount, but sufficient for bread. Maybe even a scrap of salt meat if luck showed mercy. And then he saw it. Movement. Above him. A mere flicker. A black coat. A figure taller than any man had a right to be. A cape billowing like tattered sailcloth. Gone again. But there. Unquestionably there. Jack held his breath. His heart didn't race. He had learned to master that. Panic was a fatal error. But his fingers clenched around the pouch. Could it be him? He had heard the tales, of course. Everyone had. The spectre in the mist. The entity that haunted corrupt guards and avaricious slumlords. Black eyes, black cloak, black blood. They called him Darkwater. Rumored to be the manifestation of a man drowning in his own guilt. Jack didn't put stock in tales. Tales were how the wealthy rationalized consequences. Tales were what people concocted to feel secure. But that flicker. He pocketed the coin purse and ventured into the alley's deepest shadows. He was going to pursue it, not out of valor, not even out of inquisitiveness, but because power was advantageous. And whatever that thing was, it wielded power. And Jack possessed nothing but scars and tenacity. If there existed something out there more formidable than the men who had slaughtered his family, he needed to witness it, needed to understand it. So he followed the mist, followed the legend, and didn't look back. Jack didn't run. Running generated noise, and noise etched itself into memory. He wove through the alleys like smoke, darting from corner to cart, always crouched low, perpetually in motion. His gaze remained fixed on the rooftops, not directly, never directly, but in the periphery of his vision, where shadows stirred with a touch too much deliberation. The figure was swift, but not attempting to evade him. That was the peculiar aspect. It moved with resolve, not trepidation, as if it had a destination in mind, someone to inflict harm upon. Jack's instincts clamored for him to retreat. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't meant for him. It wasn't meant for anyone. It belonged to the darkness, and the darkness was not one to share. But instincts didn't govern Saltmarsh. Information did, and Jack needed to solve this mystery. If it could be exploited, if it was genuine. He adhered to the shadows, his footsteps as light as a feather, sidestepping puddles, boards, and shards of glass. His missing pinky throbbed. The phantom pain always resurfaced when the night turned frigid and the stakes escalated. He spotted the figure again 2 streets over, perched atop a crumbling rooftop overlooking Dagger's Court. A woman's scream pierced the air. Jack froze and listened intently. Then, footsteps, boots, armor, a shout. He crept to the edge of a shattered window frame and peered down. A guard, a genuine one, not one of Van Horn's thugs, had cornered a tavern girl in the alley. Young, desperate. She brandished something in her hand. A pipe, a broken bottle. Jack couldn't discern. She was attempting to fight back, but she was losing ground. The guard snarled something, raised his baton, and then the shadows rippled. The cloaked figure descended from above, soundless, seamless. The girl didn't even witness its landing. The guard scarcely managed to turn before his scream tore through the night. Jack's breath hitched. It was real. It didn't utter a word. It didn't bellow. A blur of black striking with surgical precision. The guard's baton sailed from his grasp. A gloved fist cracked across his jaw. He crumpled to the ground like a sack of drenched laundry. The girl scrambled back against the wall, sobbing. Darkwater crouched beside the guard. No knife, no kill, just staring. Then, as if satisfied, the entity rose, turned, and vanished. The girl fled. Jack remained frozen. His thoughts spiraled in a dozen errant directions. It was real. It was him. The thing from the tales, the spectre of the harbor, the monster in the mist. And it didn't kill. That was the detail that lingered. Jack descended from his perch, eyes scouring the rooftops. He didn't know what he saw, but he had to persist in his pursuit. This entity, this man, he wasn't akin to the others. He wasn't like Wells' men or the guards who turned a blind eye while boys wasted away in the alleys. He was something else, something formidable, perhaps something advantageous. Jack slipped into a side alley and resumed his movement, silent as fog, and twice as tenacious. Jack failed to notice when the fog thickened to the point where he could scarcely see more than a few paces ahead. He only halted when he realized he'd lost the spectre's rhythm, the sensation of the entity moving ahead of him. He turned a slow circle, heart steady, but breath trapped in his throat. The silence had shifted. It was no longer vacant. It was observing. Then, a voice, smooth as a blade gliding into the ribs. "Why are you following me?" Jack froze. He didn't whirl around. He didn't reach for a weapon he lacked. He simply turned his head slightly, enough to see the silhouette rising behind him, cleaving the fog into a gash. Tall, cloaked, cape flowing in a breeze Jack couldn't sense. No eyes visible, but he could feel them. Black and weighty and ancient. He swallowed. "Wasn't," he said, as casual as he could muster. "Just walking." The ensuing silence was lengthy enough to cause the lie to disintegrate under its own weight. Jack sighed, rolled his eyes, and turned to confront him. "Fine, I was following. Happy?" The entity didn't respond. It merely observed. Jack could feel it. Not just the stare, but the gravity behind it. Like standing too close to a bonfire that might decide to leap. Still, he didn't flee. "You're real," Jack said at last. "I didn't think you were. Not truly." The figure remained motionless. Jack scratched the back of his neck. "You know people say you're some kind of ghost, or spectre, or a tale concocted to frighten drunks and pickpockets." "And what are you?" the entity inquired. The voice was low and even, raspy but no growl, just still. Jack smirked. I'm the kind of street kid who's still breathing. That tells you everything you need to know. Another protracted pause. Then the figure said, You shouldn't be here. Jack raised an eyebrow. Lot of places I shouldn't be. Funny how many of them are safer than the places I'm supposed to be. That elicited a flicker, a movement, not quite approval but perhaps recognition. Jack's voice softened, just slightly. That girl back there, you could have killed him. The guard, but you didn't. Silence. Why not? Jack asked. He would have. You know that, right? If she didn't have that bottle, if you hadn't... I know. So, because I've seen what happens when you stop stopping. That didn't make sense, not immediately. But the weight of it sank in gradually, like a stone finding the bottom. Jack studied him. You're not what they say you are. No. But you're not normal either. No. Jack folded his arms. So what are you? A pause. Then, I was a man. Once. Jack waited, but nothing else came. The fog shifted. Somewhere a bell rang 3 times. Jack scuffed his heel against the cobblestone. Do you sleep? No. Do you eat? No. Do you think about stopping? That one took longer. Sometimes. Jack hesitated, then asked something he hadn't intended. Do you ever miss being someone? You know, a real person. The fog seemed to inhale. Darkwater didn't move, didn't answer. Jack nodded as if that was an answer in itself. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. A sound broke the quiet. Not a scream, smaller, thinner, like someone trying not to be heard and failing. Jack barely had time to register it before Darkwater turned, his entire body snapping toward the sound like a hound scenting blood. What was... But he was already gone. Not running, not walking, just moving with that unnatural weightlessness that made the shadows feel like water and him like something sinking through it. Jack swore and bolted after him, boots slapping quietly on damp stone. The sound had come from the far end of Saltgate Row, a half-collapsed courtyard framed by abandoned tenements and boarded windows, a place no one went unless they were desperate. By the time Jack reached the edge, Darkwater was already there. The young girl, barely older than Jack himself, stood trembling near the crumbling wall, her back pressed to the brick, breath hitching through split lips. Her dress was torn, blood trailing from one cheek like a broken tear. She was cornered. A man loomed over her, thick-set, drunk or close to it, fists like bludgeons, rage steaming off him like sweat. You think you can run? He growled, shaking something, a strap, a belt, Jack couldn't tell. You stole from me. He never finished. Darkwater stepped into view. The man turned, and the air changed. Jack stopped cold. The alley felt suddenly, unnaturally still. The man sneered, lifting his arm to strike. And then Darkwater spoke. Not aloud, not in words. Jack didn't know how to describe it. It was like the pressure in the air had changed, like something crawled into the man's ears and whispered things no sane soul should ever hear. The man stiffened. He blinked and screamed, not in rage, in pure, soul-tearing fear. His weapon fell with a clatter. He dropped to his knees, hands over his face, mouth working soundlessly, then down, face first into the dirt, shaking like a man freezing to death. Jack stared. He felt something in the air now, like pressure behind his eyes. The sense of too many voices just beyond hearing. Distant cries, laughter, wet and low and wrong. Darkwater hadn't touched the man. He'd shown him something. The girl fled. Jack barely registered it. He stepped closer, eyes locked on the man convulsing in the dirt. What What did you do to him? Jack asked, not entirely sure he wanted an answer. Darkwater turned. The shadows seemed to cling to him tighter than before. I showed him something. He saw what waits in the deep, Darkwater said. What's behind the last breath? Jack shivered. He crouched beside the man, watching his limbs twitch. He's not dead. No. He will be. Like this? Broken. Darkwater's voice didn't change. I only gave him a peek. He'll recover. Jack looked back at him, this time really looking. The thing in front of him was a man. Once. But now. He deserved worse, Jack said, quieter now. He'll remember, Darkwater replied. Not for long, Jack muttered. People like him never do. The man sobbed, a thin, mewling sound that didn't belong in his throat. Jack winced and stood. Darkwater had already turned away, vanishing into the deeper fog at the edge of the courtyard. You didn't have to do it like that, Jack said, not quite shouting. You could have just beat him. You didn't have to send him into Bedlam. You didn't have to break him. No answer. Jack stood there a moment longer, unsure who he was talking to. Then a voice, soft, almost gentle. She's safe. He'll recover but not forget. That was enough. Jack watched the fog where Darkwater had disappeared. His palms were sweaty, his mouth tasted like copper, and something inside him twisted, not in fear, but in some strange, dark awe. Then he turned and followed. They sat on the edge of a rooftop high above Saltmarsh, legs dangling into the fog. The harbour stretched out in the distance, dim pinpricks of lanterns along the docks, a few ships swaying like drunks trying to remember how to walk. Somewhere below, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Farther off, a gull cried like something dying. Jack said nothing at first. He just sat with his arms wrapped around his knees, letting the cold bite through his sleeves. A part of him wanted to say something sharp, clever, loud. But this wasn't a place for noise. He glanced sideways. Darkwater didn't breathe. Or if he did, it didn't sound like it. He just was. A figure molded from damp stone and quiet grief. Cloak still, posture unreadable. You scare people, Jack said at last, voice small but steady. Not just the ones who deserve it. Everyone. No response. Jack pulled a thread loose from his cuff and twirled it between his fingers. Some of that's on purpose, yeah? The shadows, the cloak, the way you move. Like you're not sure gravity applies to you. Do you know that word? Gravity. It's a smart word. I learned it back before. Well, I know it anyhow. Still nothing. You're trying to be a story, a warning, aren't you? Darkwater shifted just slightly, enough to suggest attention. Jack tilted his head. I get it. Stories last. Fear makes people remember. He hesitated, then added, and stories don't like to talk back, I guess. Another pause. Then, I don't want to be remembered. Jack blinked. That's so? I want them to forget. I want them to stop needing me. Jack let that sit for a moment. Good luck with that, 'cause isn't anyone forgetting you anytime soon. He reached down and scratched at a scab on his knuckle. That girl in the alley, he said. You could have killed the guy. You didn't. Darkwater didn't reply. You filled his head with something, though, Jack continued. I saw it. I felt it. Like the air got thick with things I couldn't see. I still feel it, like it's under my skin. He saw a glimpse, Darkwater said, of the deep, the real deep. Not water, not pressure. What comes after? The place where light doesn't go. Jack shivered. That's, what, some kind of hell? A pause. A peace. Do you control it? No. That answer was too quick, too flat, too honest. Jack nodded slowly. You carry it like it's a weapon, but sometimes it feels like it's carrying you. That earned him a glance. A small one, but it was there. Jack looked back out at the city. You were a man once. That's what you said. Darkwater didn't answer. What was your name? More silence. Jack didn't push. He just looked down at the sleeping cat curled against his hip, reached out, scratched behind its ears. The purring vibrated through his palm like a second heartbeat. You ever think about stopping? He asked. Sometimes. You miss being someone? The fog seemed to draw in tighter. I miss being enough, Darkwater said. Jack didn't know what to say to that. After a long moment, he offered, I miss being someone worth missing. Darkwater looked at him then. No visible expression, no softening, but Jack felt it. Attention, the way a captain listens to the sea just before it breaks bad. You lost people, Darkwater said. Yeah. Jack's voice cracked. Everyone. Silence stretched again. Then, so did I. Jack bit the inside of his cheek. You think we're broken, he said. Me, you, all of us. I know we are. Jack gave a lopsided smile. Guess that's what makes us the same. Darkwater shifted ever so slightly. We're not the same, he said. No, Jack admitted. You're taller. And finally he saw it. A twitch at the corner of Darkwater's mouth. Not quite a smile, but close enough to count. The rooftop was quiet again. The fog had settled, thick and slow, muffling the harbor's sounds until all that remained were the occasional creaks of rope and the distant groan of shifting wood. Jack stayed seated, scratching absent-mindedly at the cat's ears while it purred like it didn't care that the world had monsters in it. Darkwater hadn't moved in minutes. Jack glanced sideways. You're not gonna vanish again, are you? 1 second here, next second gone like smoke. I might, Darkwater said. Jack nodded like that was fair. He stood slowly, stretching his legs. I should go. Cats'll be waiting. No response. Jack hesitated. Something gnawed at the back of his mind, something unspoken. Maybe gratitude, maybe curiosity, maybe just the unfamiliar itch of not being completely alone. You gonna keep following me? He asked, not quite joking. I don't follow, Darkwater said. I watch. Jack turned toward the rooftop's edge. Right. Of course. The watching shadow. Can't have a name, can't have a friend, but you sure as hell know how to loom. He took 3 steps, then paused. I meant what I said. You're not a monster. Not really. You might be turning into one, sure, but you're fighting it. Silence. Jack turned back one last time. You don't scare me, he said. Not the way you scare them. Another long beat. Then just as he turned to go, that's a mistake, Darkwater said softly. Jack smirked. Maybe, but I've made worse. He dropped down the side of the building like it was muscle memory. Hands gripping brick, boots skimming loose ledges. Half a second later he was gone, swallowed into the alleys. Darkwater stood alone beneath the watchful fog. He didn't speak, didn't move. But when he stepped back into the dark, he didn't vanish right away. He lingered, watching. You've just heard Ashes in the Fog, a boy looking for answers, a myth trying not to become a monster. In Saltmarsh, even the smallest moments leave long shadows. If this story left its mark, be sure to subscribe to Karl Otto's Dark Anthology for new tales every week. And if you believe some monsters deserve to be followed, share this with someone who walks the fog too. Until next time, stay curious, stay terrified.